our MC. Our moderator will be Jennifer Bonnett. And with that, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. So before we get started, I want to kind of get an informal poll from the audience. How many of you guys consider yourselves gamers? How many consider yourselves techies? How many are both? Okay, okay. Interesting, interesting. So some of you know me, you met me last night at the Pitch Circus. I am Jen Bonnett and I run ATDC, the Advanced Technology Development Center. We are Georgia's technology incubator. I spend my days driving around the state of Georgia, around 74,000 miles in the last 2 years alone, going to all the lovely scenic places in Georgia. So we run programs right now in 10 locations across the state, including Athens, Augusta, Savannah, Columbus, Macon, and 5 locations within Metro Atlanta. And one of the things that I see as I travel the state and actually even kind of the globe studying technology entrepreneurship is that a lot of these communities have gaming communities and they have techie communities, and a lot of times they're really different communities that they don't do a lot together. And that's what we're going to talk about here. And I have this hypothesis that if we could actually bring gamers and techies together and build a larger, stronger community, that we could actually put Savannah on a larger map, on a higher trajectory towards being a recognized technology startup gamer community in the world. So that's kind of why we're doing this today. So at this point, I'm going to allow my co-panelists here to introduce themselves. We're going to need a mic, so thank you. Why don't we start with Aleshia? So brief introduction, who you are, what you do, and where you sit, gamer, techie, both.
I am Aleshia Howell. Professionally, I'm co-founder and CEO of Codebase. We are an iOS development firm here in Savannah. For the purposes of this panel, I'm a techie, but I feel really passionately about gaming. I think I have a storytelling background, so I think gaming is really, going to be good for human connection and facilitating empathy, and I just really like the gaming industry, even though I work in tech.
Hi, I'm Cyril Guichard. I'm French, I'm not Texan. I used to be a creative director in digital advertising companies. I worked at BFG for 10 years, Saatchi, Leo Burnett. So I guess I would be a technologist. I've made apps, I've made websites, but I also, on my spare time, I also run my own independent game development studio, Garage Collective. I've made over 35 games, and now I'm a professor of interactive design and game design at SCAD.
Hi, I'm Keith Fletcher. I'm definitely more of a technologist. I have not terribly been much of a gamer. I was Senior VP of and CIO for Low Enterprises, a nice small $8 billion under management company. And currently I'm here, I'm Chief Operating Officer for Speros here, but I have a very heavy background. I started as a programmer, worked all the way up and through, so I've done quite a bit of it. And Savannah has got a great community for development.
And I'm Nick Batey. I wear 2 different hats here in Savannah. I am the IT director for Chatham County by day. It's a job that a career that I've gone down for the last 20 years. My other hat is owner of Avant Games. So I'm kind of a technologist and a game developer. I've been working on games just as a hobby for about 15, 20 years. It's just a little side thing that I do. But we've had a couple of games that we've put out, and the main thing that I think I like to kind of say about the Savannah area is that there's a lot of talent here, and I think there's a lot more people that are both technologists and want to be game developers or starting game developers the problem that we have in this area is it's hard to start a job as a game developer here because there's no community here. So kind of starting off with your first comment, I feel like what's missing here is just the start, the peeling off of the beginning of it, and finding a good beginning point is the key.
Excellent. So that does kind of take me into the first question, and it's kind of like, where are we at, right? So when I think about community, I think about places, people, events that bring like-minded people into the same space, and collisions happen and magic happens from those collisions, to try and, I guess, give a definition of community. So I'm going to ask, I guess, Nick, you kind of alluded to this, but is there a coalescence of a gaming community here in Savannah? Where do you find them? What's going on in the gaming community?
I'm probably the worst example of, or the best example for this, I guess. A lot of my time is spent in front of a computer coding. So I don't get out enough. I don't go out, if I have free time, I want to go and I want to code something else. But I think there's more going on that I know about. But I think getting everybody in the same room and really getting that collaborative effort going for getting that first game here is still weak. Getting everyone kind of together and saying, I love that Cyril's company is named Garage Collective, because that kind of gets towards that idea of, this is just people who want to get together and make games. I don't think we have enough of that, and I'd like to see more of that. But I think right now it seems to be happening more than I've ever seen it before. The bar has been lowered a little bit to getting into game development, and I feel like that is starting to happen more and more here.
Cyril, can you add your viewpoint to that gaming?
Absolutely. Well, we were actually with Nick having a discussion right before. Like a couple minutes ago. I think we are really looking at a perfect storm right now, and maybe it's my point of view has changed since I joined SCAD. As I said, I'm a professor of game design, and so I see we have 800 students that are part of the program. They are all gamers. They are all technologists. They want to code. They want to do everything, and so you have all of those young minds that are extremely eager to get in the industry, to get their first experience in, and they are right now in Savannah. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we have the Guild Hall. I mean, we are here. They have a board game shop. They have a themed restaurant right next door. That's something that did not exist 5-6 years ago. Again, like, we have the feeling that in Savannah, the more I'm looking around, the more I'm seeing kind of like gaming-themed events, communities. The Guild Hall is where, if you like board games, if you like to play games, that's where you will meet with your friends. And then we have the rise of like many indie studios, like yours, like mine, like Professor Mamaya's Impeller Studio. So I'm kind of like, for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been seeing a lot of those things rise up. Does that answer the question?
It does. Thanks.
Okay, good.
My mic was starting to cause some interference, so I was like, oh. So same question for the techie scene. So Aleshia, I'm going to let you start. What is the community like for techies here in Savannah right now?
Well, you know what? I haven't been in Savannah for very long, but I moved to Savannah because I was living in Silicon Valley with my husband at the time, and we did not view it in a favorable light, so we were ready to make a move. And we had visited Savannah before. We were kind of thinking about it, so we Googled Savannah tech scene, and Geekend was the first result. And so that was that. And so we got in the car and we're here now. In addition to my professional responsibilities, I am involved in Geekend now, and I also am on the leadership team of TechSav, or you may hear it Tech SAV. It's kind of the GIF thing. TechSav is my preference. But we're a community organization that educates the public about tech topics, builds skills in the existing development community, and connects the two groups. It's been very grassroots. People were doing the work on it long before we arrived, but we're starting to see it grow really exponentially with the number of opportunities that are available to junior developers to build their skills. So we're really enjoying the ride so far and are looking forward to it getting better all the time.
I've got a slightly different perspective. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Speros. We're the largest technology services company. We're busily hiring technology people constantly. So we have been seeing our need has been very heavy for more and more techies, not just end user, but high-end networking, problem solving, development, and everything. And we're starting to see a better talent pool in Savannah. This was very, very difficult 5 years ago to find people. We would end up having to import people that we needed. Now we're finding them locally, coming out of some of our tech schools, coming out of Guichard, coming out of Savannah Tech, are ones that we can actually hire. And quite honestly, if any of you are so in mind, I've got 2 openings right now. But no, it is, the fact that our talent pool is getting better is probably one of the most significant indicators that we're growing our technological base. Because I can now hire people locally instead of having to leave the area.
Keep turning my mic off. That's kind of where we're at today. As being community leaders, you know, what are your aspirations? Where could this community go? You have a mic? Why don't you go for it, Keith?
What I'd really like to see our overall community going is not just increasing our startups, etc., but also to increase our talent base and bring in more large companies that need or have jobs available. So the talent that we're making and we're starting to get better at, that SCAD is creating, that Georgia Southern, everywhere, so we can actually keep the talent that we're building, keep it here in Savannah. As groups like this create a pool of talent, companies will be able to say, we could be here if the talent's here. So that would produce jobs, and then we can, then a lot of you, how many of you are still in school or just finished school? It'd be nice to be able to get you really good jobs here as you can stay. I'm a little prejudiced. Savannah's been my home my family's home for forever. But I kind of like the city. But I think if we can keep our talent, I think that's going to be a real base for a community. As long as we don't send kids that we've taught all these skills and they leave, if we can keep them, we'll have everybody that we need.
So
I completely agree with my colleague. I used to teach career advisement portfolio at SCAD, and I always have that discussion with students. And I tell them when you're going to pick your first job, look at the market, because your first job may last 1 year, 2 years. You want to go in a place where you will be able to find your second and third job without having to move. So I think having a network, having a solid structure so that we don't have a couple or a handful of companies, but enough offering that people can actually move to Savannah thinking for the long term and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to build a family, etc., and I will stay here, is very, very important. So we are not necessarily talking about just 1 or 2 companies, we are talking about a whole network, a fabric. In French we say the economical fabric. And I think it's a very good term because it's things that are kind of weaved in together. And I really, really hope that we can build that fabric. There are various things in the work with CEDA, with SCAD, with us as well. And I'm really crossing my fingers that like some studios are going to look at Savannah and say, you know what, the cost of life is pretty low, the quality of life is very high. Why don't we, Georgia has an amazing tax incentive. We are not far from Atlanta. That has become the mecca of the film industry. So that means that for the gaming side, we have visual effects, etc., etc. I mean, we have a lot of talent that is nearby. And so I'm really, really hoping that Savannah can become that place where it's good living and where it's hopefully soon good working as well.
Yeah, I have to agree with Keith and Cyril, but I will add also that, so TechSav's slogan is live here, work anywhere. And, you know, as these usual suspect tech hubs become more populous and more expensive and more congested, and it becomes more difficult to make an impact, you know, talented people are looking to places like Savannah to call home and put down roots and like contribute to the community. So I think like as that situation continues to develop in other cities, we'll see more people coming to Savannah. It's a thoroughly delightful place to live. It's very beautiful. And there's an opportunity to do really meaningful work here because it's just not full of people doing tech.
Last year, Jack Mamaya sat up here and he said that the barriers to entry are much lower now than they were 5-10 years ago. The tools available for game development have made it possible to where you can build a very successful game in a garage, in a basement, and this is a very, it's done two things. It's made the bar very high for high quality games, because there's a lot out there now, and to stand out, you have to have much more high quality content. But at the same time, the barrier to entry for simpler or mid-level games is much lower, and so you've got much more opportunity to get into the gaming industry. I think that's one of the things that is helping this area, kind of this energy start to build in this area for game development. And getting this next step in there, I think, is just getting these people together. One of the key things that I think needs to happen for us to move forward, Savannah needs to be known for at least one game. It needs to, we need a big success. You know, does anyone in here know of a company called BioWare by chance? Now, where is BioWare state? Anybody know where BioWare is? Where it's housed at? Yeah, it's I think actually they're in Toronto, but I know, right? Well, it's right. But looking at it from the other way, my real point is this: if you wanted to get into game development and you can move anywhere you wanted to go, do you know a city in your mind right now where you would go and start that? You know there are certain cities that are known for having successful games. We need to be one of those cities on some level. We need to have a successful game. We need to have some collaborative effort with everybody who's interested. Maybe you know, or one of these great companies that are started out. I know Jack's trying for his. I know that Cyril's got some projects going on. We've got our projects going on. We need to get something really out there that really stands out, and I think that will be the next step. I think that's where everything is going to just spiral out of control at that point. Max mentioned in his talk yesterday that there was this point where it just blew up, and that is what we need to happen in this area for game development to really take off, for there to be the advisors to say, you can stay right here and do game development. There are several companies to choose from here if you decide to stay in Savannah. But right now, that's the next thing that must happen for game development to become real here. It has to pay the bills. The bottom line is we have to be able to go and work in the morning and leave in the afternoons and still have a life without doing this as a second job.
Sounds very similar to the startup ecosystem in Savannah. We need a hit. We need a hit.
BioWare is a Canadian video game developer located in Edmonton, Alberta.
Great. That problem's solved, right? Yeah, so audience is pretty young. There was one startup here a long time ago called HO Systems. Does anybody know what it was? Got a few people clapping, right? So HO Systems was a cell phone billing company. right? And had about 300 people here in Savannah doing technology work circa 2001. It was acquired in 2001, 2002 by VeriSign, the .com company, and they took all the jobs away. So that is one of the challenges. If we can't create an ecosystem that has some success stories and there's a successful exit and those entrepreneurs come back and claim and start their next company or their next gaming company or their next project here, we're never going to get that cycle of success and innovation going. Back to a little bit more about communities versus companies, right? We see a lot of similarities between the gaming community and the technology entrepreneurial communities. That it's people of the same skill set. We freaking dress the same. We don't like mornings for the most part, right? So what are the things that make somebody, go into gaming and become a part of that community versus coming in and deciding to be a, SaaS application programmer, business techie? What are the characteristics that separate the two communities versus bringing them together? Any ideas?
I don't know if this answers the question or not, but I think the question is, why aren't people going into gaming more than going into a technology? So why are they choosing to do SAP versus games? Is that kind of what we're getting at here? So I would say it comes back to the same discussion. There just aren't the jobs. I started in 1994, and I was putting together computers to make it where I could play the better games. So that's kind of what started me working on the little dip switches on the keyboard, on the motherboards and everything, all the real tedious I/O IRQs and everything that you used to have to do to get them to work. It got me my first job, and it was much easier to make money doing that than make money making games back then. Through the years, obviously, I kept that job, and I kept working in that career in order to do something along the lines that would pay the bills. I always wanted to switch into gaming all the way through, and I think there are a lot of people that want to do that now. So to make that happen, I think maybe some really good incentives that are maybe as Cyril was pointing out, getting some of these larger studios maybe to have a satellite office here to get some of that ecosystem kind of kick-started would be a big help. Cyril was actually telling me a minute ago about something I didn't know about, which I think is great. SCAD has a program running right now where they're doing some things on kind of kickstarting these companies, which is some game companies. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's great, and it's the first I heard about it. I can't wait to look into it after this. So I think that that's what needs to happen for that jump from technologist into getting some of this other entrepreneurial energy into the game development environment. I think that's what's needed.
So my thoughts on what separates a technologist from a game developer is a question of motivation. So most of the technologist people I know concern themselves with utility and improving processes and making products and making things easier, and it's all about the use case and making something that's really nice to use and delightful. But game development is, to me, more about the desire to express a point of view. And so I think that is really at the core of what separates the communities, just what motivates people to create software. That's my opinion.
I think with Nick, want to maybe expand on a little bit more. It's more difficult unless you're going to go corporate as a programmer. You can get paid quite well to do SAP programming, to do everything else. It's a little harder to get paid to do game development. So obviously, a lot of it is economics. Also, on a technology standpoint, you do have not just development, not just code development, but also then services. Actually, just what Nick did originally, which was fix computers, etc. A lot of us that started as programmers, and I did, you wind up taking the easier route, which is hardware, etc., because you'll get paid to do that. You can still then write code, et cetera, in your spare time. But I think that's one thing that also has historically separated it, where it was easier to get paid to be a technology expert as opposed to a programmer. There seem to be more jobs for those, and it seemed to be easier. And so a lot of us, that's the direction we went. Even if we started writing code, even if we wanted to stay writing code, we went on to somewhere that could pay the bills. So some of it is, you pointed out, ATC, we need to develop a larger community where you can continue as a programmer, continue to do that, and pay your bills. And that takes a larger community. When I started, it's a long time ago. Hardware was much more prevalent.
Yeah, I actually started in big corporations and then jumped ship, right? It was easier making money in the big corporations as a consultant and then startups, but.
Well, I'm a little bit different. I mean, I don't see the difference. I mean, my entire life has been dedicated at bridging the gap. For the small story, when I was working in advertising, in digital advertising, and we were making apps and websites, etc., my clients were tobacco for 10 years, alcohol, gambling, firearms, so basically all the stuff that is good for you. And the reality is that I built my expertise selling experiences to clients that cannot really communicate about their product. So basically the way we were doing that and the way we are keeping our audience engaged and interested is through game mechanics. So basically we created game-like content so that people would actually interact with us. So I've never believed, I mean, obviously there is a difference, but I believe that the difference is a point of view. To me, technology, apps, programming, when you make a website, it cannot just be pretty. It needs to be usable. It needs to be entertaining. People need to want to connect with it. How do you make people connect with a product that they don't necessarily want to use in the first place? By making it appealing. How do you make a product appealing? Well, there are a lot of lessons that we can take from from games, game mechanics, etc. Because games are very good at entertaining people and keeping them engaged. So, in my opinion, the frontier between the two things, not things, but the two concepts is very, very blurry, and it becomes more and more blurry. One of the things that I often discuss with my students is user experience. So the tech industry, user experience has become that kind of buzzword, and I mean, buzzword, I'm not being dismissive at all, it's very important, but it's like everybody now wants a user experience designer. And the game industry looked at that and said, hey, you know what, we can use our own as well. It's true that right now our game designers are designing our flow, our menus and things like that, and they don't necessarily, that's not their specialty. They don't necessarily know how to do it very, very well. The same way that in advertising, we built a lot of games for a lot of brands. Well, we could have used more game designers to help us do that. So I don't see a strict separation between the two worlds. I think that there are a lot of things that are in common, because at the end of the day, our goal is to engage people. And the audience that we are dealing with more and more is an audience that was born with a phone in their hand. They were born with a console at home. And so I think that the frontiers between usability and gamification, and I know gamification is a dirty word, game-like content, are kind of mixing more and more and more. So I don't see a difference, I'm sorry.
Excellent, excellent. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, there's this it's been out in the Savannah Morning News for a while now. There's this study, right? Senator Martin has published a study, and this sub-Senate group did a study and has named both Augusta and Savannah as part of an quote-unquote IT corridor. So Keith, you know a lot about this. Why don't you fill everyone in on what that means, and then I guess the question for the broader panel is, okay, how do we make this thing happen?
What happened is last year, the our state government in Atlanta, put together a study commission to decide should a technology corridor, which is the term they use, but just think of it as a technology area, one or more of them, should that exist in Georgia, and if so, where should it be? After a number of hearings, a lot of testimony, they selected Savannah and Augusta as the locations that could benefit most in the state from having a state-sponsored technology corridor. What that means is that the state would get behind companies, startups, existings that relocate, et cetera, with tax benefits and easier permitting, et cetera. This has been done all over the country. A lot of states have them, everywhere from Florida to Ohio, Portland, everywhere. I mean, this is a very common thing. It's to try to bring companies to an area or try to facilitate startups in an area by making their costs easier, by hoping to designate a location, not a small one, but a large location, where you can get a community starting to form, you can feed off each other, and you can actually get, from a government standpoint, more jobs. From our standpoint, a community of people that then we can work and live with and grow our community. This has gotten a decent amount of traction. We have a number of firms in Savannah that are helping. We just had the Savannah City Council adopt a resolution in support of the Senators' committee and their decision that Savannah should be one of the two locations. But at this point, it's up to everyone in this room and everywhere else to decide how are we going to take advantage of the fact that the state has said they're going to do something to help us grow a technology base here. So, Nick, you're accounting CIO.
Yeah, and I see a good bit of this from both perspectives. My interaction with the technology committee that was assigned by the state to evaluate this was through my primary job, through the county, and I think it's a great thing for this area that we're even being considered to, because having that level of support from the state and having the locals also adopt, which I think the city of Savannah adopted Thursday, I believe it was, a resolution to support this. The county is right behind that. I know that I forwarded that on, and they'll be adopting a similar resolution right behind that. That's commitment from the elected officials to say we want to support this and we want to grow this out. We're behind it. Maybe that means that there's some financial or some incentives behind that as well, which is real exciting. That means that we can do something. A technology corridor, so if you just go by the definition of corridor, it means a pathway to which doors open. And that means that if we're going to put gaming as part of that, gaming has to be either one of those doors or it has to be part of that corridor. It can't be that gaming is trying to leech off of a corridor that is being established for something else like medical. Now, I think either one of them are great. I'm not discounting that we should or should not do medical or whatever our focus is for this corridor, but I believe strongly that if you want an outcome, you have to, every one of your actions either puts you closer to or further away from that outcome. So every action we take, if we want it to mean that we have a gaming industry here, every action along those lines needs to lead us towards that goal. And so everything that we build off of this tech corridor, if we want to see gaming here as an industry, we should be fighting for that. We should be pushing for it. We need one of those doors to be gaming. And it needs to be a destination. And we need to make all of our actions support that and to go towards it. Everything that we do builds on making that happen as an outcome. I think it's a community thing. I don't think that this is an independent company necessarily. It's everyone's going to have to come together and make this happen as a community, and that means that the companies here that are trying to create games now need to work probably together a little more than they do, and we probably have to kind of put aside the special goal that we want to get to, or the special project that is, you know, like for us, it's our Dragon Souls game that we've been working on, and maybe we put that aside and work on some collaborative effort in order to make that happen as part of the tech corridor, to make this get established and to get this engine started, to get this what was the term you used a little while ago, get this ecosystem kind of kicked up. I think that's where we need to go, and I think that's where this corridor could really benefit this area. And I think the area is ready for it.
I think some of the challenges is that the only industry that I saw specified for Savannah in the document was actually logistics.
Logistical technology. At the moment, that does not mean that that is going to be stuck with that. It was an easier piece to help our politicians understand what Savannah could do.
So I think there's, so there's an issue there, because I'm not seeing a lot of innovation in logistics. I'm not, right?
Well,
Right?
globally, there's an enormous amount. Not so much here, but
not
globally it's huge.
here,
No,
right?
but
What I'm
not
seeing here is medical. I'm seeing gaming. I'm seeing digital arts. That sort of stuff, right? That's what I see from kind of my outsider's viewpoint. The second thing I want to point out is that there's been like no money associated with it yet,
Well,
right? But I do want, and you're going to say yes, right? But the other city that was mentioned in the study has already seen over $75 million committed to them for cybersecurity. So, right, Augusta has gotten a $50 million payout already, and they're building the center for cybersecurity, and they've been committed another $25 million since then. And,
well, the primary reason, for those of you that don't know, Augusta is the location for the entire United States military's cyber warfare group. The federal government is going to be putting literally billions of dollars into cyber warfare. It's going to be an enormous amount. And the state then, when that was named, started this process before there was ever talk of a technology corridor. They started this to know that they want to make sure, because they did a lot of lobbying, obviously, to get Georgia and to get the fort up there named as location for the military's cyber command. And that's kind of a big deal.
My little point here is we should be thinking about how much money we want to ask for and how much and what we want to put it towards, right?
That's a given.
Mr. Governor, Nathan Neal, where's your checkbook, sir?
That's good. No, oh yeah, absolutely.
I think when I get home tonight, I'm going to start putting together a proposal for $50 million for the next game company here. I've got an idea or two.
Yeah, I don't question. How much did EA have when they started? We need $50 million. We can do that.
So we're going to open it up for questions in just a minute. I want to put one more thing towards the panel here. Is I got into this kind of ecosystem development accidentally a long time ago, and I got there because it was what could I do, right? I'm not a wealthy individual that can write a check to a bunch of startups. I'm not that person. I'm not a venture capitalist, but I do know what startups need. I've walked in their shoes. I've been there, so I've always thought about what can I do? What can we do collectively as a community to move towards this path of a vibrant, nationally recognized ecosystem for that, where gamers, gaming companies, startups, and technologists thrive in Savannah. I always like to think about Boulder. Like, could we be the next Boulder? I mean, Boulder has a lot of things in common with Savannah. It's about the same size, by the way, right? 20 years ago, nothing there other than the university, right? Now it is like one of the hottest places for startups on the planet, right? So if we, as a community, wanted Savannah to be the next Boulder, what are we doing? How can we do it? How can the people in this room impact change, make things happen?
I would argue that it's already happening. I'll put down the flag for the existing community here. Like there are people who have been like in the trenches building the community here for many, many years, and I think they probably are delighted to hear that finally somebody sees and are willing to like put some actual money behind it. Right now, most of the efforts in the tech community are run on a volunteer basis. Geekend is a nonprofit run by a volunteer executive team. So, I mean, this is great news. I absolutely think that Savannah could be the next Boulder. So I think it's a matter of like coming together and putting aside differences and uniting like under a common banner to like make it happen.
So the question is, what can we do to turn Savannah into Boulder, right? I don't know. I mean, I think we all have our own agenda. I mean, as a professor, my goal is to give my students the passion of coding. I teach coding, and the drive to consider that they don't need necessarily to join a AAA company to make a game, that they can do that at home, they can do that by themselves, and that they can distribute it pretty easily. The distribution channels the last 10 years have exploded. Now you can make a game very easily. You can also distribute it pretty easily. I mean, the marketing becomes another story, but what I'm saying is that if you have a good product, you can put it out there and get a shot at selling it. I think that again, when we see Geekend, when we see the Guildhall, when we see Scat Plus, when we see Impeller Studio, there are a lot of people that are working, and they are doing each and every single one of them is doing their own little thing, and once you add up all of those little things, well, that's how, you know, from the many rivers, that's how you make a sea. And I think that things like today, for example, Geekend, like getting some recognition, getting the word out there. Like I had no idea, I didn't know about Dragon Soul, so now I know. But maybe it needed like Geekend for me to kind of like maybe connect a little bit better with my community. I lived here for 14 years, and I'm just learning something today. And I think that we need more events, we need more visibility about who's doing what here. I think that's the thing, is that we get in our silos and we do our little things without necessarily knowing what other people are doing. I know that we are trying to create an IGDA chapter in Savannah. There used to be one. It's been dead for many years, and we are trying to bring it back to life. But like things like Geekend, etc. Let's communicate, and let's make sure that we don't lose track of what other people are doing.
Well, one thing that helps to turn something into a Boulder didn't happen overnight, and Boulder didn't happen because two people decided to make it happen. It's because people started to talk about it. People that were there started to talk up how good it was to be there. The first people that showed up told additional people. Well, we already have the first people here. We already do. We don't have to start this from scratch, because it's not. We need to start telling other people that aren't here in Savannah how good we have it here, what the community is, what we can offer, and what we can do. Our education is getting better, our infrastructure is better, our quality of life is certainly better than most anywhere else in the country. Luckily, I've actually been able to live all over the world, everywhere from Hong Kong to Taiwan to LA, New York. Little prejudice, Savannah's home, but Savannah still is the best place in the world that I have ever lived. Yeah, and that is something that we need if we want to grow this into something like the next Boulder. It's not going to happen by all of us sitting in a room and talking to each other. We all need to talk to other people that aren't here, that aren't in Savannah, that are somewhere else, and tell them how good this is, and have them tell somebody else, and so on and so forth, until when someone says, let's move my company here, or let's invest here, it's not, where's Savannah? It's, I've heard about that, and yeah, it's a good idea. But that's going to take all of us here starting it. It has to start somewhere. Just as my colleague here said, it takes a lot of rivers to fill up a sea. Well, we need to start filling it.
I have to agree that I think it's already happening as well, and I like the comments about that. I can say to Cyril's comments as well, we don't have enough getting togetherness. The Geekend is great. I love this event. It's one of the reasons we decided to sponsor. It's tough for us to sponsor anything. This is the only sponsor that I was willing to get into, and it's because I really believe in this event. I love Geekend and the Creative Coast and ATDC. They've really brought together a really energized ecosystem of entrepreneurship over the past, since the time I've seen it. I think it's grown more and more and more. I think we should latch onto that. As a community of gamers should really kind of try and huddle around that, and we go and we ask for this corridor to have a piece of it, to have for gaming to have a piece of this corridor, that it be one of the doors off of this corridor, and that door be funded with something that will help get all of this going. Funding ATDC to expand the efforts in this area, funding Creative Coast a little bit, and organizations like that make these kinds of things get together. In the avenues that generate those locations, such as the Guildhall and these types of places, to encourage them or give them incentives to participate and to generate more of this kind of content. One of the things about us, one of the first things that I learned in my travels with Avant Games is I am awful at marketing. And really phenomenally bad. I don't think that you can be worse than I am at. I loathe it. I'm just don't even want to spend any of my time doing it. When I sit down and think I'm going to work on Avant Games, I'm going to work on Dragon Souls tonight. I sit down and I open up my coder and I start, Visual Studio, and I start pounding out code. And then, nobody knows anything about what's going on in Avant Games. And so we're just bad at that engagement part and the organization of getting all of the things that we also need. We all want to code, we all want to create, we all want to design, we want to do our part, but everybody needs to kind of get around, huddle around something to get that community going a little bit. And if we can get some energy around that and get some of that energy into a proposal, if we have local support, if we have state support, we put all that in the proposal, we make all that part of our initiative going forward, and we all get behind an agency that's been trying to get the energy going here anyway, ATDC, Geekend, Creative Coast and all. I think that there's a lot of potential that if they're throwing $50 million at Augusta, I think we can get a small piece of that to make something happen here. I'm very confident in that.
All right, now we'll be doing our questions.
I guess it's kind of a question and a statement, but so I recently got on the board for Visit Savannah, and the more and more that I learn about what they do, it is an incredibly well-run operation. Visit Savannah, what they do is they encourage people to visit Savannah, and it's not a mistake that Savannah is an incredibly well-visited area. About 50 years ago, some folks came down from Jamestown, met with city leaders, and developed the McClaskey Report, which sort of spells out here's what the city should do to become a world-class destination. And 50, 60 years down the line, you can see that planning that they did decades ago has become huge. And so I think you're absolutely right that we need to, this isn't going to happen overnight, but we also, I think, mainly need to work on selling Savannah. So it's not just about visiting Savannah, but about investing Savannah, and really making sure that we're supporting the organizations that are working on selling and encouraging people to invest in Savannah. So it'd be kind of cool to see like an invest in Savannah that's working with Visit Savannah to help sort of, turn visitors into investors, because it is a beautiful city, and I think we've got a lot of potential.
Anyone else?
I'm one of the organizers of Tech SAV, the organization that's growing the tech community in Savannah. And I can tell you in my inbox and in our meetup group, every single day, somebody is moving to Savannah who works in tech. But the problem is that these people are not connected to the community in Savannah. A lot of them work for companies all over the world. They're freelancers. And some of them are passionate and want to give back to the community, and they get involved, but the majority of them, they just do their thing. So we have an incredible amount of untapped brain power, and these people are the type of people that we want more of in Savannah. The problem is that every initiative at the government level and all of these organizations that are funded by the government focuses on companies. So there's a question here. The question is, what are some ways that we can tap into this brain power, experience, and the type of people that we need more of in order to grow the type of corridor that we want.
Yeah, just real quickly, just from because I work in government as well, there's a reluctance to for government to invest into companies in general, to fund companies. They just don't feel like it's their role to do that. They would rather fund initiatives that build that framework. So it's hard to define, which makes it even harder for it to actually happen. So it's tough to get there, but I would say that if we're looking for anything around that, I would say that what you're doing with Tech SAV and what's happening with ATDC, what I've seen of it over the years, I just think we need to do more of that, and those people kind of help us all get out of our caves and come out and talk. And get into more engagement. I think that's really just the only thing that really needs to go. Is just somebody used a term about a year ago that I've totally stolen, and I love it. And it was collision density, and it's something that they were talking about, like Silicon Valley, the idea that these technologists just run into each other with this idea and they start building something together. And maybe Silicon Valley wasn't a good example, but whatever. It's the idea of collision density. We need to increase that by condensing the area that we move in, and that we just kind of get together more. I don't know if that answered your question, but I really think that that's what needs to happen if we're talking about government getting involved. I just think they need to support more of that and incentives.
One thing that we have an opportunity right now, because the legislation around what this tech corridor is going to be has not been written. All that's been done is it's been said it will exist. Would you have a way to quantify how big and how many of these types of people and what type are they? Would there be a way that we could actually identify them as something? Because you can't do anything with government unless you can identify it.
What about a survey?
A survey might work, but also even more detail. Do we have real counts, like hard numbers? Yeah, pictures.
Right. So that was always going to be my last ploy, right? So we are doing a survey, actually a study. So SEDA, Savannah Economic Development Authority, Georgia Tech Savannah, and ATDC are funding a study called a Innovation Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Study. And so if you are attending here today, you will probably get an email from me in the next 2 weeks with a survey. I ask you to fill it out. Some of the things that we're trying to understand is what types of games and startups are you all starting? What types of talent do you think you're going to need in the future? So we're looking at, it's got questions about what parts of Savannah you live, work, and play in. Are you in Richmond Hill or are you down here, right? Where are you? It talks about what kind of industries either you sell into or you work in as your day jobs. What kind of technology do you work with? And then what kind of workforce or training and things like that are we going to need in the future? And the goal is to come back and say, we actually have a study from 2009, by the way. We have a study from 2009. So we want to kind of earmark where we've come from 2009 to today with an eye towards the future and building some sort of really great cohesive vision about what Savannah could be, and then selling it to the world and the legislators that are going to fund this projects for us. So that's the study. You'll get an email from me, Jen.
Finish. If we can quantify it, the study will help. If you have real data, I mean harder, actual, you've got names. Now's the time. If we have an opportunity right now to help influence what they're going to do. Right now we have a window. So if we can figure out, should we make them part of some of these workforce incentives, which they aren't part of right now, what can we do? This is an opportunity. So right now, if you've got it, I'd love to talk to you about it, because yeah, we're going to be pitching stuff to the state to see what we can get.
I have a question. Nick and I talked about this earlier, but I have a house in Hiawassee, Georgia, which is in the middle of nowhere, and the local EMC got a grant from the federal government, and they went ahead and put fiber optic. So I have blazing fast internet speed. Here in Savannah, I have a choice between AT&T and Comcast, and quite frankly, they suck. What can we do as a technology community to improve our connectivity in this community?
Here, you get that one. That's yours. I'll do it more than
Just real quickly, so that somebody else has a chance. I am involved in an initiative with City of Savannah. We went into looking into a survey to find out what does the data look like in this area. Obviously, I don't think it's a big surprise. It's not all that great. And it really comes down to how do you convince a company to invest more into the infrastructure here because they have to have a payout on the other end. I don't believe that the internet is in that same state it was in the 90s when all that made sense. I think we're way beyond that, and it's now kind of a utility that needs to have a little more incentive to grow it more. If we want to grow this community, we have to put some effort towards that. To that end, we are drastically overdue on getting an RFI out, but the local governments are trying to do something to help that along and make it into a better situation here by just helping competition and driving the saturation of good data quality or availability in this area. I'm not a big fan of anything like free internet for all. I think that's silly. We don't even give free water to people, so we're not going to do free internet. But I think it needs to be a lot better than it is. I think we need to be talking in terms of fiber only. There's no reason to be putting anything else in this community, and it needs to be growing out a lot faster than it is. So there's a lot of work. It's a huge project. It's no small task, and there are a few people against the idea, like AT&T and Comcast.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm sitting here trying to think of an analog for the gaming community that's similar to, say, the maker community where there's a makerspace movement. And I was wondering if maybe a render farm, a powerful render farm that's community-based, is that something that gaming community would be able to utilize for smaller startup gamers? I know at home I have every time I render an image in a detail, it takes hours and hours and hours. And if there's a way to, like, you know, rent space at a render farm, would that help?
I mean, I think it would definitely help. I don't know. I mean, obviously, if you need a render farm, you're talking about very demanding graphics. I just don't know how much of it will be a concern for independent developers. I mean, usually when you're developing with small teams, you kind of work around these things. But I think that no matter what. What was the term that you used? The collision density. I actually am going to steal that. So collision density, I like the idea. You know, when you have 200 particles in a huge space, the odds for them to collide is very low. It's either you increase the number of particles or you reduce the space. And I think that in Savannah, since we were talking about ways to kind of get this kick-started, maybe it's about reducing the space. I'm not saying that we should make the city smaller, but however, though, what you're talking about is also a dedicated space where people can meet and increase their chances of collision. Like today. Today we met, oh, he has a project, I have a project, they are both done in Unity. Hey, you know what, we should talk. And these little things, increasing the odds for people to meet, to talk, because they are both renting a render farm, for example, I think all of this would be beneficial. So yes, having a space, having meetings more often, being able to talk to peers more often, all of this would be beneficial. I don't believe that, and it's a French guy that tells you that, I don't believe government is going to do anything for us there. I think that government will do something when the network is there, when we have that kind of economic fabric, then the government will have like big dollar signs in their eyes and they will say, okay, how can we milk this? But, and they will tax it. I think that at that point, it's the small people and the people that are eager to create something that are eager. We were talking about creating roots. I've been in Savannah for 15 years. I want to stay the next 15 years. And so my constant goal is to try to find ways to secure my stay in Savannah. And I think that it's pretty much the same for everybody. And I think that that's when these people get together and network together, that they can create something that becomes big enough that the government will try to preserve it or control it or whatever it is. Yeah, I'm not excited about the government part. I'm more excited about Geekend.
I just want to point out that anybody who's interested in participating in a co-working space, Bull Street Labs is at Creative Coast, and they have a space running. So if you're interested, you can go there, 2222 Bull Street, and they have fiber optic internet.
And to add to what Cyril was saying about, I don't think the government will either, like I was talking before, but I do think that a good proposal lined up with this tech corridor, saying we want to be one of those doors, even if they do choose logistics, somehow tie one of those doors to what we're trying to do here, and putting forward a proposal with local and state support. And if we can get any kind of grant funding to even stand up any part of that, or to sustain any part of that, I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of energy behind helping whatever it is. You don't have to wait for it to actually be successful before they get the dollar signs. They can see that ahead of time. Because remember that any good industry here is tax dollars going in to build out more services or to better support the community. They will certainly get behind it as long as they can see that the end of it will generate more jobs in this area and more successful companies in this area. I do believe that. It's just you have to prove it. You have to show that thing, just like any other investor. I think forget that most of the people that are on these boards or the city council, they're citizens as well, and they're looking at whether or not they want to invest in something or not, and whether or not their staff should invest in that thing or not. You just have to sell it, I think, just like you do an investor.
All right. All right, so I'm going to have to interrupt us. We've gone over. So our next, first I'd like to thank the moderators, speakers.